Okay, so we have a new episode of Legends and Leaders, and today it's great to have Katie here. Katie, you're somebody that is young, but you're in the investment world, and you've had a lot of accomplishments already at a young age. You were awarded the prestigious Forbes 30 Under 30 because you've been able to recognize a lot of opportunities, I think, in investments that maybe other people haven't, and really take advantage of those. And so you joined Torch Capital after already having some success, creating your own platform that had a couple million users, and you decided, hey, I'm going to really focus on consumer here. I understand consumers, and you've been able to help out a lot of different companies really accelerate their growth. So I'm excited to have you here and to get into your story.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Ben.
Awesome. So where did your passion for investing and kind of business leadership come from? Was this something you always had when you were young? Like, how did this kind of begin?
Yeah, so that passion actually started when I was in high school. I started my first company when I was in high school. It was in the food conservation space. It kind of just happened before my eyes. I saw an inefficiency in the market and I wanted to do something about it. So started taking excess food from our local restaurants and giving it to homeless shelters. Again, just saw
Huh.
inefficiencies and a better way to handle a situation. But I didn't at the time even know what that meant or that was, entrepreneurship. I then went to the University of Michigan. I studied business there. Immediately was drawn to, entrepreneurship and joined clubs and started working on small businesses. My first was a digital business card platform. My second, which ended up taking off, was a company called Companion, which is a consumer safety platform allowing you to virtually walk friends home. Built that over 2 years at the University of Michigan to over 3 million users. Made a ton of mistakes, but got me totally obsessed with consumers and how do you build for them and how do you build trust with them. And again, I guess it's just always been around two things, which is you know, how do you provide consumers with better experiences and how do you preempt where consumer behavior is going? And then how do you fix inefficiencies within the existing market we live in today?
Mhm. So then how did you kind of wind up being at Torch Capital? Like, how did that happen?
Yeah. I So I started getting into investing after Companion. I met Mitchell Green, who is the founder and managing partner of Lead Edge Capital, right after I left Companion. And I said, I don't know what to do now. I really love starting companies, but I clearly have no idea how to do so. And he said, you should come work for us. We're a growth equity fund. And you can see what good and bad businesses looked like at the growth stage and then bring those learnings back downstream. And so, originally I thought I would spend, 2 years at Lead Edge really understanding the growth stage businesses and then bring those learnings back to early stage and start another company. But really fell in love with investing and,
Mhm.
um, you know, every single part of it from finding great entrepreneurs, connecting with great entrepreneurs, helping them build different aspects of their business. And so, and also the diversity of different businesses and just seeing the entire landscape of early stage sectors, as well as just always being able to learn about new sectors constantly every day rather than just being very laser focused on one specific business or industry. And so, while I love growth stage, I always knew that I loved early stage. And so, I decided post Lead Edge, I really wanted to go to an early stage fund.
Mhm. So what would you say are like the fundamentals of a successful investment based on the ones that you've been in and what you've seen from around you? Like, what are some things that always remain constant in any successful investment?
Yeah. So the things that always remain constant in every single investment I've done is a few things. One, founder market fit. Why does this founder have, I would say, the specific permission or unique advantages to be building this product? So, if a product requires opening doors with payers, does this founder have unique ability to do that? If this company really requires, brand and building an online community, why is this founder the right person to do that? So founder market fit, especially at the early stage, why can this founder unlock unique opportunities that others can't is so critical. I always think very much also around uh, value prop pain point versus burdensome business model. So I always look at frameworks. I always look at
Mhm.
frameworks and like almost like a weight, like does this add enough clear value versus the burden it'll take to either sell or convince someone to buy it? Usually, if there's clear value prop pain point, um, what is the perfect combination is clear value prop pain point and a not burdensome sell. If you have a burdensome sell, no clear value prop, that's dead in the water. You can either have low value prop but low sell. Those businesses can do really well if it's the right founder. And then high value prop, high burden. Again, those businesses can do really well if there's a right founder.
There investments that that were outside of this, like these things that stayed constant that you still did, and like why did you do those?
Um, you mean ones that were outside of these frameworks?
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, I would say those
Were there any?
weren't my best investments. Um, but no, I typically try and stay within that framework. Some businesses pivot, investing at the pre-seed seed, businesses can pivot and ultimately it takes a couple tries to really find what that entry point is and
Mhm.
find what creates product market fit. Sometimes, it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Mhm.
But that's the framework I always try and use.
Mhm. So you created this platform, Torch Talent Connect, and it was like this marketplace to help people get jobs, things like that. Like, why did you want to take on this initiative to do that, and like, how helpful was it to people in the end?
Yeah. So again, created that kind of on a whim, deep COVID. Going back to what I said earlier, just saw a big inefficiency in the market. There were a ton of companies that were growing and needed more resources within COVID. And at the same time, there were so many companies being laid off, or so many employees being laid off, and both were coming to me. And so we had a lot of founders saying, I need this, I'm raising, my company's growing really fast. And then I had so many employees and companies saying, "Hey, we're laying off this amount of people," and I just saw a big inefficiency. And I
Mhm.
guess with that investor mindset, you just try and fill those gaps always. And so um, it was a localized thing. It ended up kind of taking on a life of its own, and I think it helped a lot of people during COVID, which is a very challenging time. And um, it's not I don't keep up with it anymore. It was kind of a time and a place and filling a very specific moment of like hyper layoffs and hyper need. But it was a great learning and I think it brought a lot of value to a specific time.
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think a lot of people benefited from it. Um, so, what do you think is really unique, Katie, about Torch Capital? Because there's a bunch of consumer funds out there. There's some early stage ones. Like, what do you think that's really differentiates Torch Capital compared to maybe some of these other ones that are out there?
Yeah, that's a good question. So what really differentiates Torch, and is why John and I kind of got together from the get-go, is you have these traditional consumer funds, right? And I think everyone kind of has a perceived notion of consumer. People bucket it into CPG, into retail, into e-com, but consumers are everything. They're everywhere. They engage in every single part of the world. And what we saw that had a big gap in the market was you had consumer funds that were strictly focused on like food and bev. And then you had B2B funds. And then you had, vertical specific funds like healthcare funds and fintech funds. But if you look at the biggest companies in any category, right, whether it's CPG or healthcare or fintech, they're the ones that have found a big enough consumer pain point. They're creating the best in class consumer experience and they have the best brand, which makes people want to choose them versus others. And you see that with both consumer facing companies and B2B companies. And so John and I really got together with the notion that consumer is really ignored across so many sectors, with especially in things like consumerized B2B, SMB, healthcare, fintech. And there was a movement of even B2B companies using a lot of consumer grade tactics to sell their businesses. Think Figma and,
Mm-hmm.
Notion. Those are all product led, community driven businesses. And so we got together and we have a very pointed thesis, which is, where have consumer experience been previously ignored, or where do we think consumer behavior is going? Um, but we invest horizontally across all sectors. So we spend a lot of time thinking about where this thesis applies in healthcare, in fintech, in future of work, in SMB, and then we also invest vertically in the consumer application layers, of course, but also in the B2B layers. So think selling into payers, or in the infrastructure layers that help power consumer businesses.
Mm-hmm. So you guys have great advisors. I think maybe and some of these individuals are investors as well, like Jenny Fleiss and Bryn Putnam. Having these people around you, like how impactful has it been to you, Katie, as well as to the fund? Like, what have you been able to learn from some of these people? And how important has it been to the companies that you invest in, the founders? Like, how impactful these investors been to them as well?
100%. So our LPs and advisors are unbelievably special, and we get a ton of value out of them, from everything from, a lot of our deals come through our LPs and advisors from a sourcing perspective, just because they're very boots on the ground with other founders. From a diligence perspective, we have very both sector specific and industry specific uh, LPs and advisors, as well as very kind of like uh, skill specific. So we have, marketers and engineers and operators. And so from that perspective, it's really helpful for us from a diligence standpoint because we invest so broadly with a very specific view on consumer. We get a lot of very sector and vertical specific intel from our LPs and advisors. So they've been very helpful. And then on the portfolio side, anytime our portfolio companies need anything, we've been able to tap our LPs and advisors, and they've been unbelievably helpful. We also do a lot of co-investing with our LPs and advisors and get them directly involved with companies, which has been great for us and also great for them.
Mm-hmm. What have you learned from these people too, like you personally?
Oh, that's a really good question. I've learned a ton. Just, we have so many founders who have built such successful companies like Rent the Runway and like Mirror.
Mm-hmm.
And, we sit down with them and really understand, what were the things that they wish they did differently? What are the things that that they learned from getting from Series A to Series B? What were the main takeaways from board dynamics that, help us be better board members and help us be better investors as well as just partners to founders? Because, founders are going through so much as well as building their business. And, sometimes it's hard for investors to really have that empathy. And so having other founders who have a lot of empathy towards that is always so helpful to just always bounce ideas off them.
100%. Yeah. So, Katie, you made Forbes 30 under 30. What do you think were the biggest standout criteria that that they saw in you, that you were able to make the list? Like maybe, or some of the criteria that you think that you achieved that helped you get on the list.
I think Torch is a very special and unique place. And John took a big bet on me when I was, 23. And I was able to run a lot of my own investments and, build a brand within the industry at a pretty young age. And, I worked really closely with the rest of my team on a number of the investments we did, in my early years at Torch, like Tia and Sollis and Little Otter. And so, you know, I think it's a mix of some of the deals that I've led, and some of the amazing founders that I've been fortunate enough to back, as well as just, the community we've built within the ecosystem. And, Torch, we started from scratch 6 years ago. And so now, well, fortunately, it's become kind of a household name in New York. And I think that's just a testament to all the hours we put into it, I'll say.
How impactful was it to you to to be on that list? Like, we, for example, we just had Matt Higgins on recently. He was a guest shark on Shark Tank, and he talked about like what it did for his brand being a shark on Shark Tank, the deal flow access he had. Like, were there certain things that kind of changed for you once you made the Forbes 30 under 30 list?
Um, were there things that changed me when I made Forbes 30 under 30? I think founders, it's kind of a stamp of legitimacy for founders when you're doing a bunch of cold outreach like us investors do. And so that's been, great. Um, yeah, I would say that's the main thing.
It's good to hear. So, what areas now are you most excited in investing? I mean, you're right. You mentioned earlier there's a ton of areas you guys invest in, broad consumer, but what are some specific ones you're really looking at? Is that like AI? What, even if it is AI, what with AI and consumer specifically is most exciting to you?
Yeah, I think, AI consumer is a huge one for us. There's so many verticals that are just going to be changed. When you think about when you think about categories like connection building, whether it's dating or professionally, um, uh, that's a huge category. When you're thinking about the resources that you have at your fingertips that you didn't normally have or were inaccessible, everything is so much more accessible now. When you think about tutors and SAT prep, like just so much on the consumer side is going to be unlocked. Also from a discovery standpoint, right? When you think about shopping or restaurants or travel, all of that gets unlocked. And you know, the other side is from a consumer standpoint, we're very excited because a lot of this is going to be commoditized, right? And so,
Mhm.
um, something that starts mattering a lot more, even more than it does today, is brand and building that great relationship and connection to your end customer. Um, so that I see huge opportunities within consumer and AI. Also spending a lot of time in healthcare. I think there's so much to be done around how do you actually align incentives of the patient and the system. And it's a lot of 1% iterations that hopefully we all get there. Um, but we see a ton of opportunity to you know break down the barriers that are stopping consumer alignment with the healthcare system, and the same thing within fintech. So we see a ton of opportunity happening, and the way we think about AI is it's really kind of an accessibility layer or a layer that really unblocks a lot of previously inaccessible things like going
Mhm.
back to healthcare, like labor shortage. How can you start augmenting labor shortage with AI? So there's a lot of opportunity, and I think it's going to be a very exciting year because a lot of great founders are going to start coming into market and building new companies.
Totally, totally agree. So you guys have had a couple different exits. One of which was Sweetgreen, another one I think was DigitalOcean, Compass too. Based on how many the investments that you do, I mean, you don't have to give a specific number, but how often does it really happen that you do have an exit and you do have a liquidity event like those?
So yeah, John has been fortunate enough to have a bunch of early exits in his career as an angel investor. Compass, Sweetgreen, DigitalOcean, a few others. Um, Sorry, the question was, how do we think about that for Torch?
Like how often does that generally happen based on deals you're investing in? Like what how often do you get an exit event?
Yeah. So we're early stage, right? So we're thinking about exit landscapes in 5 to 10 years. So we're just starting to hit that point now, and so we're excited, and we have a bunch of companies that are super mature and late stage and starting to get a lot of that interest. So hopefully within the next few years.
Mhm. So just the last question I have, Katie, like what are some of your goals over the next 5 to 10 years? Like at a more of a personal level as well as like on a business level. Like what do you hope to accomplish? What are some things you feel like you haven't been able to do yet that you want to be able to do now?
Yeah, so I just made partner, which is very
Congrats.
exciting. Thank you so much. And so, from my standpoint, it's really just doubling down on the same. What's been amazing over the last couple of years in my career is just really starting to spend a lot of time on the portfolio and watching companies get from pre-seed to seed to Series A to Series B to Series C, and learning all the pattern recognition that comes through a growing, maturing company. And then, you have these Series C companies, and then you invest in a new pre-seed company. So it's kind of like you have all these children that are growing up, and you get to kind of take the lessons learned from the original and bring them back downstream. And so what I'm excited about is continuing to invest in great founders, continuing to bring the insights I've learned firsthand from some of the later stage companies that I've now invested in, and bring those learnings back down to pre-seed and seed. And continue to grow our network, continue to build up Torch as the leading consumer focused fund in New York and in the US, and really just continue investing in great founders.
Well, I'm excited to see your continued growth and Torch's growth, and appreciate you coming on, Katie. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Ben.